Commission on Elections says not even the COVID-19 pandemic could impede the 2022 national elections. COMELEC spokesperson James Jimenez says the agency will only suspend elections or declare failure of elections when polling precincts are destroyed or rendered.
The Commission on Elections will be testing a mobile app voting system for overseas Filipino workers.
Kung successful po ito, I think this is the future, di ba? This is the future technology of elections. Kasi mga tao, lahat naman, well, hindi naman lahat. Marami ang may smartphone. So, lalo na po ang PWD, elderly, pregnant women, napakalaking tulong po kung makaboto tayo ng mobile app.
The pandemic has caused many adjustments to the schedules for voter registration, but the Commission on Elections continues to encourage Filipinos of voting age to register and vote in 2022. What will be the challenges in the presidential elections? We discuss later in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to this special edition of The Chiefs. I'm Robbie Alampay, and with me online are Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star, Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5, and Ed Lingao of One News. Chiefs, happy Friday.
Happy weekend.
Yes, happy weekend.
Ami, mukhang walang debate. May mangyayari ba? Whether it's Harry Roque or...
Payag si Harry Roque saka si Tony Carpio. Sabi niya, hindi siya uurong na kahit anong debate. But I don't think matutuloy pa yun.
Oo, mukhang wala na.
Oo, yeah.
Mahirap yan. It shows the disunity ng bansa natin. Mahirap.
And I was talking kanina sa Big Story, I was talking to Dean Tony Lavinia. He was also saying, beyond, never mind the spectacle or the potential, stories there, but sabi niya, unfortunately, if the objective is to clarify the position of Malacanang on the South China Sea, wala ring masisettle. Because at the end of the day, he said, it will be just like Secretary Locsin or Secretary Lorenzana saying something, and then when the President contradicts it, wala ring nasettle.
Kaya nga. Pero yung isa pang binabantayan ngayon, yung nakapasok na...
Ayun ang mas nakaka-alarma. Biro mo, 12 sila, di ba?
Dalawang critical, binabari ko.
Tapos 2 critical, oo. Tapos yun nga yung di ba, pinag-uusapan natin na binan nila yung air travel. Pero you wonder nga kung paano yung mga papasok ng mga barko. And true enough, ayan na nga, nakagaling siyang Vietnam di ba? Parang nag-India, tapos parang Vietnam, tapos India yata, tapos
India.
tayo.
No, it was India, Malaysia, and then Vietnam.
Yeah.
Siya sa India. Kaya hindi siya pinapasok sa Vietnam kasi nag-adjust.
Yeah. It docked in 2 ports in India, stayed for 1 day in Malaysia, and then went to Vietnam. By which time meron ng symptoms, so they had the crew tested in Vietnam, doon lumabas yung positives.
Kaya hindi sila pinapasok. Kaya sila pumunta dito sa akin.
Okay.
But the thing is, yung 12 kasi, they're now under quarantine. The question, I suppose the bigger question is the remaining 12. Kasi kalahati lang yan
21 sila na
21,
Pinoys.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the other half, now I suppose now it all depends on how well secured they are under quarantine. Kasi kahit pa paano, alam mo na yung 12, they really are sick. Baka mamaya kasi yung the remaining sailors, baka asymptomatic.
Parang natatandaan niyo yung sa Australia ba yan or sa Florida last year, yung meron ding barko na cruise ship naman yun.
Yeah.
Tapos di ba hinahati lang ng pagkain from outside, dinala ng ng medical.
I was just thinking about that. No, parang when you think back, di ba that happened in Cambodia, they didn't want a ship to dock. Pagkatapos sa Japan, di ba? Ganun din yung problema.
Right.
Nung time na yun, we were all still thinking, the story was about the ships. Because somehow the people, I remember thinking, okay yan, they can keep it out of their shores. They just have to find a way to deal with the ship. And it was still isolated, di ba? And then 1 year later, wala rin talagang the borders are really
Tuloy pa
porous.
rin, ano?
Hindi mo talaga maawat.
Saka
Anyway.
di ba sinasabi nga ni Ed he was mentioning reports about COVID being airborne. Kaya mas nakakatakot Di ba?
Oh, and you know,
Yes.
to cut to the chase, of course, that over the past year, that has led to a lot of lives lost,
Yes.
and really at this point, part of the process for everyone is really coping with this, especially as it strikes closer and closer to homes for many of us, which is why kanina po sinabi natin, we'll talk about the coming elections and the implications of the quarantine, but for now, we'll still talk about COVID, but in particular, we'll start with something going on at Quiapo Church. We'll have the Quiapo Church Parochial Vicar Father Douglas Badong or Badong. How am I supposed to pronounce this, Father? It's
Tama po, Douglas Badong po.
Badong. Okay, Douglas
Good
Badong.
evening, Father.
And good evening, Father.
Hi, Father.
Good evening po sa inyong lahat po.
And you know, we wanted you here because we understand you're setting up this project, a memorial wall for lives lost. And you know, I think that goes without explaining. Everybody at this point has lost somebody close to them. As I said, it seems to be striking closer and closer to home. But despite the fact that all of us have gone through grieving separately, or even together virtually, what is the whole objective of your project?
Since kasi last year, because of the quarantine, mga restrictions natin, so many of our loved ones and the families were not able to ask for a blessing, prayer, or mass, no? Kasi nga, dahil nga doon sa mga
Last.
protocol. So, na-suspend
rites.
lahat yun.
Yeah.
So we thought of baka makatulong sa mga pamilya na madasalan natin yung mga namatay this time of COVID or pandemic this year. So we put up yung memorial wall for them to write yung mga names ng mga pangalan ng mga namatay. And we offer also that wall hindi lang sa Pilipinas kundi sa buong mundo na mga namatay sa panahon ng pandemya. And we offer a prayer, a holy hour last night, and we lighted a candle in memorial of them. So, kaya nilagay namin doon sa Plaza Miranda.
Father, maybe you could explain to us the setup. As you said, sa Plaza Miranda to. But ano ba to? Physical wall? Meron ba tong virtual component? And how exactly, when you say na pwede mong ilagay dyan yung mga pangalan ng mga pumanaw sa inyo, what does that mean? Ano po yung setup?
Yung pwede po silang pumunta ng dito po sa Quiapo and then pwede nilang isulat yung mga pangalan nila dun sa wall. And then last night po, blines ni Monsignor Ding lahat po ng mga pangalan. We remember all those who died in this time of pandemic. So, ganun lang po kasimple na para lang talagang kaisa nila ang simbahan, kaisa ang lahat po ng mga deboto sa pagdarasal po para sa mga kaluluwa. Kasi yun po yung pinaka-importante, yung hindi natin makalimutan ipagdasal ang mga kaluluwa ng mga namatay. Even yung ito din po actually ay we offer this for all our frontliners na hindi natin nabasbasan, hindi natin namisahan, na hindi, lalo tigit, di natin napuntahan because of the quarantine.
Father,
So, yun po natin,
this complements the prayer of Pope Francis na ginagawa tuwing midnight, Yan yung
Apo,
global prayer niya.
Kasi yun na rin po yun, we include all the souls na namatay po, especially this time of pandemic. We offer prayers kasi yun talaga yung importante ngayon. Kagabi po, nandito yung ilang pamilya ng mga namatayan kasi the Quiapo Church itself, we have staff and members of organizations na namatay this year. Kaya we invite yung mga families nila. Nadalhin din yung mga urn na yung mga abo po mabasbasan in every mass na mapuntahan nila dito sa Quiapo.
kumusta na po yung church ngayon? Kasi tuwing dadaan ako dyan, laging punong-puno ng tao eh. Kaya sa loob.
Opo, talagang we anticipate po na hindi mapipigilan ng mga debotong pumunta ng simbahan ng Quiapo. Kaya dito sa amin sa simbahan ay pinaghahandaan namin ang pagdating nila na maging ligtas yung pagpasok at paglabas nila ng simbahan ng Quiapo. And unti-unti po bumabalik yung mga tao eh. And hindi namin sila mapipigilan talaga. And wala kasi talagang iba nang pwedeng kapitan eh. At ito yung hindi mo mahahawakan, hindi mo mapipigilan yung tao kapag ang Diyos na yung hinanap nila.
What has been the response of people to the memorial wall? I mean, siksika na ba yung mga pangalan dun sa wall na isinulat or kumusta na?
Marami pong marami po yung nagsulat and up to now, marami pa rin yung nagsusulat dito. And sila po nagsasabing, kumbaga, nakakaluwag ng damdamin, nagpapasalamat sila na kahit papano sigurado silang nadasalan yung mga mahal nila sa buhay. Although, even yung mga sa online po, no, they can send yung names online, no, at yun naman ay sinasama natin sa bawat misa.
Father, it seems...
Father, forgive me for being a bit cynical, pero what's to stop, or do you have any mechanism in place to prevent, for example, politicians or political figures from taking advantage of the wall, or writing in big block letters their name in memory of all the dead and all that, but with the name in big block letters, or any interest group from taking advantage of the wall and its very public side?
Hindi po namin yun, kumbaga, i-entertain. So, ito po talaga ay purely offering of prayers para sa kanila, para sa mga namatay. Tulong para sa mga pamilya na up to now nag-grieve. No? Kasi hanggang ngayon, yung mga urn, yung mga ashes ay nasa bahay pa rin, hindi pa rin naililibing. Kasi naghihintay pa rin na mabasbasan, naghihintay pa rin na mamisahan. So, and hopefully, walang mga politicians type na mga ganyan.
Wala, siguro naman walang maglalagay ng pangalan nila dyan at baka lalo silang malaasin sa eleksyon. Pero ako, ang worry ko yung vandals. Meron bang mga nagva-vandalize?
Ay, wala naman po. Wala naman dito kasi talagang we assist yung mga tao po na gustong magsulat. Kasi yung mga ballpen or pentel pen, after na magamit ay didisinfect ulit para talagang safe na yung virus kumbaga. So,
Father,
they will approach po. They will approach yung staff namin at to accompany yung ballpen, yung sign pen, then susulat nila.
Father, na-imagine ko yung kukuha ka ng ballpen, isusulat mo yung pangalan ng mahal mo sa buhay. No? It seems so basic and yet so fundamental. I'm wondering, kasi close kayo siyempre sa mga parokyano nyo. I think all of us here have attended, e-burals, online prayers. We've all virtually grieved. And I think we've accepted that. That is legitimate grieving. But sa mga nakita nyo po sa parokyano nyo, sa mga nawalan ng buhay, it sounds like a very basic question, but I really want your insights from the ground and dealing with your parishioners. Ano pong nawala sa atin in terms of being able to grieve? I mean, ano yung hindi mapapalitan ng online na mga pinaggagawa natin without belittling, what we've tried to do?
Yung ano po talaga, yung empathy, di ba, yung may maramdaman ka na may kasama ka kasi nawala sa atin yung physical contact eh. Yung gusto natin may kayakap, gusto natin may umahawak, tumatapik, nagsasabing kaya mo yan, huwag kayong matakot, andito kami, tutulong kami. No? And yung nandiyan mismo, kaharap mo mismo, nakakatulong yun sa mga grieving families, pero nawala yun sa ngayon. No? Kasi nga, kahit nga isahan natin, limited eh. Hindi pwede, bawal, daming bawal. Pero hanggat maaari ay we accommodate them Kung gusto nyong idaan sa simbahan, idadaan natin, basta sumunod sa protocol. And malaking kaluwagan yon sa pamilya. No, na kumbaga yung pagpapasalamat nila na para dun sa kanilang yung mahal sa buhay. So yung ano po, yung talagang yung feeling, yung assurance na may karamay, 'di ba? Kaya nga nakikiramay tayo. Yun yung parang hinahanap natin sa na nawala
May mga kilala kong nawala ng mga mahal sa buhay because of COVID, ano. And merong common silang na feeling nila kasi nga bigla-bigla usually bigla-biglang sumasama, bigla-biglang nawawala sa kanila. And there's a common sentiment na inabando na daw sila ng Diyos at saka yun ang, do you hear this a lot? Saka ano sinasabi ninyo kapag yun ang sinasabi sa inyo?
Pag yun ang sinasabi, talagang wala akong masabi. Kasi yun yung nararamdaman nila sa ngayon. And we have to understand yung kanilang pinanggagalingan. Pero afterwards, siyempre, nagiging malinaw na sa kanila and we assure them yung ating spiritual assistance sa kanila. And kumbaga, nagiging okay na rin. Common naman po na magalit sa Diyos and we understand them. Yung questioning yung Diyos, okay po yun. Naiintindihan po yun ng Diyos. And kumbaga kami, sa part namin, tahimik lang kami. Kasi siyempre, hindi natin kayang sagutin yun.
Actually, kung minsan, sabi nga nila mas gusto mo pa lang pag namatayan ka, mas gusto mo na lang na huwag ka nang masyadong tatanong-tanungin. Alam mo yun, parang sometimes silence and just being there is better. No? Pero Father, kayo, matanong lang, kumusta po kayo sa mga, ninyo, sa mga, naman tawag doon, convent? Hindi sa mga madre yun, ano? Kumusta po kayo? Convent, yeah.
Ito naman,
yeah.
kami po
Kayo rin
dito
ba
sa
ay,
Quiapo.
yeah. Sige po, Father.
Kami po dito sa Quiapo ay so far naman, meron kaming 3 senior dito. And the rest ay kami na medyo bata-bata pa naman kaya. And so far, okay naman. Salamat sa Diyos kasi wala pang naku-COVID. And talagang nagiging maingat din. Kasi sabi namin kapag ang isang pare dito na COVID, sarado talaga ang simbahan. Wala talagang mapupuntahan ng mga tao. Kaya hanggat maaari ay nililimitahan namin yung paglabas. Although we do outreach, we do relief goods sa iba-ibang lugar, extra careful lang talaga kami.
Pero Father,
Kasi mahirap.
Father, bukod dun sa, I don't know if this is what Lucci also meant, but beyond dun sa kumusta kung tinamaan ba kayo ng COVID, is, we've been reporting about doctors and frontliners na talagang lupaypay na, talagang bagsak na dahil walang tigil ang trabaho. On the other end of it, hanggang punerarya, hanggang crematorium, sila na rin nagsabi, hindi na rin namin kaya. Parang, sa totoo lang po, the religious, and let's call them the religious frontliners, gumigit na kayo dun in that process between trying to save lives and then burying our dead. Nandun kayo sa gitna, you're the one giving blessing, giving comfort as well. Ramdam nyo rin po ba, just on the level of trabaho, just on the level of parang ang dami ko ng I've celebrated too many wakes this week, halimbawa.
Paano ba? Kasi ako po personally, nalulungkot po ako kapag nakikita ko yung mga taong hindi makapasok ng simbahan. Gusto nilang magdasal, pero hindi na sila makapasok ng simbahan. Noong mga unang buwan po dito sa Quiapo, kahit sarado ang simbahan, ang mga tao nasa rehas, sumisilip, masulyapan lang yung Nazareno. Nakakadurog din ng puso kapag may nagsasabing, Father, baka pwede niyo pong basbasan, baka pwede niyo puntahan yung mahal nila sa buhay. Kaya lang, dahil nga maraming restrictions, hindi namin yun magawa. So bilang pare, para bang mayroong kirot na ano ba to, ano bang gagawin ko? Gusto kong tulungan pero hindi ako makatulong, limitado. Sinong tutulong sa mga ito? Sino yung kinakapitan ng mga tao sa labas? So nakakalungkot po sa bahagi ko bilang pare yung hindi sila mapuntahan. Minsan kahit hindi po taga Quiapo minsan Cavite, Laguna, naisip ko, wala bang ibang pare na malapit doon para tumulong? Yung mga ganun po na napapaisip din ako sa sitwasyon. Pero sabi ko nga po kanina, no, kapag kailangan mas maging maingat kami kasi kapag isa sa amin ng na-report na quarantine o na COVID, buong simbahan talaga isasarado na.
Father, meron bukas Mass for the Dead ang Archdiocese of Manila. Pwede niyo
Apo,
pwede niyo ba kaming bigyan ng advance message? Ano yung main message doon sa misa?
Yun naman po, no, kasi nga bahagi nga po ng mga medyo may pagkukulang na hindi natin napuntahan yung mga namatay sa loob ng isang taong ito. And the Archdiocese of Manila offered a one day o kumbaga yung schedule to offer a prayer para sa kanila. Medyo sa amin lang dito sa Quiapo ay nag-advance lang kami para nga sa mga staff, mga members ng organization para mabigyan sila ng special na kumbaga pagdarasal na namimiss nila o kaya hinahanap nila. So, and para to give them comfort din siyempre. So yun po yung isa din na gagawin ni Bishop Pabilio bukas, no, na ibibigay niya yung message. Part ng prayer ritual bukas po. Para po din sa mga frontliners na namatay din sa panahon.
Tuloy-tuloy ang misa sa Quiapo Church, Father. Kung pupunta doon ng mga tao, can they hear Mass outside the church o sa loob lang sila?
Sa loob lang po. Sa ngayon kasi, hindi po kami inaalaw na gamitin ng Plaza Miranda na tayuan ng mga tao. Since under MECQ, yung capacity o 10% capacity dito sa loob ng simbahan. So, medyo tiis-tiis lang po talaga yung mga tao sa pagpila para makapasok ng simbahan. And, we are trying our best po sa simbahan na ma-accommodate yung mas marami pong tao na nais manahimik o magdasal sa loob po ng simbahan.
Pero every hour may misa, di ba? From 4 a.m.?
This dahil first Friday po ngayon, and then kapag nagluluwag po yung mga curfew time, nag-a-adjust po kami ng oras. And ang isang malaking tulong lang na pwede namin magawa sa ngayon ay misa, which is very important po sa aming mga Katoliko po, yung misa, na mas maraming makadalo ng misa, mas maraming makatanggap ng komunyon. Kaya nagdadagdag kami ng misa kapag nag-a-adjust po ang curfew time. So ngayon po talagang dahil 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., so inagahan na rin namin para less pila, less din yung paghihintay ng mga tao na makapasok ng simbahan. Kasi limited lang po yung number.
Hindi ba kayo wala ba kayong planong mag-migrate to the online platform? Because, you know, the Christian churches have done that and quite successfully, no? So yung services are online. When will the Catholic Church do that? I mean,
actually, ang sa Quiapo po, 7 years na po kaming naka-online. Kumbaga medyo established na yung aming online kasi nga we have Filipino abroad na talagang mga deboto and through online nakakapagsimba sila. And yun po, no? Mayroong mga Zoom recollection, Zoom formation. Ngayon po dito sa Quiapo, binabalik na namin yung formation o seminar, catechism sa lahat ng mga organizations via Zoom. So,
hindi kayo nag-YouTube live stream? Hindi kayo nagaganon?
Meron na rin po.
Mass.
Facebook live po kami. All masses po. Naka-Facebook live po and even sa YouTube po.
Yeah.
So, naka-establish na po kami 7 years ago pa ng ganito pong platform. So, kumbaga hindi na po ito bago sa mga deboto. Alam na po
So,
nila.
yung masses ninyo, naka-live stream din? Or
Opo,
Sunday
all
mass
masses
lang?
po.
Okay.
From Monday to Sunday po. Talagang
Okay.
yun yung tinutukan namin dito sa Quiapo. Na lahat ng misa, anumang oras, no, from yung weekdays po, 5 a.m., 6, 7, 9, 10, 12, 3, 5, and 6. So lahat
Lahat
po
yun,
yan.
live stream.
Naka-live stream po yun. So, nagdadagdag lang, additional kapag Friday and Sunday. So mas marami po yung misa.
Okay. Father Douglas, Quiapo Church Parochial Vicar, Father Douglas Badong. Maraming salamat po.
Thank
Salamat
you.
po. Ingat
Thank
po
you,
kayo.
Salamat po. Ingat po kayo.
Sige
And we'll need to take a break. Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back. Welcome back to the Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. With me online are Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5, Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star, and Ed Lingao of One News. And mukhang inaantay pa natin yung next guest natin. No? But in the meantime, I just wanted to pick up again on what Father Douglas and the people at Quiapo Church have set up. Diba? Kasi nasanay na tayong lahat sa mga, doing everything online. And iba pa rin yung merong kahit pa paano may physical, di ba? May physical,
Kunyari, nami-miss ko kayo. Oh.
Kunwari, di ba?
Physical.
Kunwari.
Kunyari, oo.
yung mga papizza ni Robbie.
Oo, di ba? Tama. Na-miss niyo yun.
Kaya nagpa-pizza si Robbie.
Nangyari yun.
Potentially. Kasi nga nanalo yung podcast sa anong award yun?
Yeah, Human Rights Press Awards.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Maraming
So, kailan
salamat.
natin mararamdaman ng pizza nun?
Meron yun.
Wala
Hindi naman Human Rights
pizza.
Violation siguro umasa, no?
Baka naman sa 2022. Oo. Vaccine willing.
Yung wall na yon, ang dami-dami ng signature, malapit ng mapunta.
Talaga? Oo nga. I
eh.
was curious.
But what's the wall? Is it literally a cement wall or is
Yes,
it
it's literally a wall. Nilagyan nila ng
Semento?
parang tarp. Hindi. Parang nilagyan nila ng
mga pirma na.
tarp. Tapos doon pumipirma.
Alam mo, dapat
is it
dapat
removable or is it
dapat ang gawin nila doon, yung wall,
Dito,
lagay na rin yung voting precinct mo at saka kung ano yung barangay mo
National
para
ID system
pagbigyan yung itong next guest natin makaluwag din siya. Baka mas marami pang nandun sa wall sa Quiapo kaysa sa sinusulong ng
Sa
ating
registrants.
Oo.
Oo nga.
Hindi, biro lang. Alam namin may success naman dyan. Ipasok natin. COMELEC spokesperson, Director James Jimenez. Good evening, Director Jimenez.
Hi, good evening. I'm sorry I'm late. Sorry.
Hi sir, good evening.
Director, biro lang yun. Alam naman namin kahit pa paano, marami nang nag-online registration. Yung dalawang anak ko, na-register ko ng maaga. Buti na lang. But how is it going? How is it going, the voter registration?
Well, so far it's going great, no? As far in terms of new voters, we are already at around 1.6 million. And we're expecting to have another 1.2 million to come in from the SK. Automatic yan. They don't have to register. So, pasok mo kagad yan sa bilang natin.
Ano bang target? Ano bang target natin?
Yun na nga. This is against a target of around 4 million.
Okay.
So we're actually doing pretty great, no? We still have a few months to go before September 30. And historically naman, this is the time na talaga dumadagsana yung tao sa pagpaparehistro. In any case, dito lang naman sa NCR natigil yung rehistro eh. Everywhere else in the Philippines na hindi tayo ECQ or MECQ, tuloy naman yung ating registration. So tuloy-tuloy lang yung pasok ng tao.
In the meantime,
Umamin nga ako kay ano eh. Aminado ako, I called up Director Jimenez mga 2 weeks ago asking him about particulars kasi yung mga pasuna, yung rehistro dahil hindi nakakapag-photo dahil nagko-cover.
Ako yun.
Di ba? There's always been that magic question among reporters who've been always deployed come election time na do I need to get my old data, find out my old precinct, or do I go in as a new registrant? It turns out may cut-off pala na sinasabi ang COMELEC na before this year, I think it's 2014, kung hindi ka pa nakakapag-boto, napurga ka na sa sistema. So you are now effectively a new registrant.
So ako yun.
Tayo yun actually.
Registrant ako.
Is that
Oh.
anything to qualify there, Director Jimenez? And for that matter, let's open it up, di ba?
Sure.
If somebody's out there watching, yun yung first basic question niya, do I still need to register or not? And then the second question nila is, how do I do it?
Sure.
Kasi marami yun.
Yung 2014 na date naman yan, that has to do with the adoption of biometrics. Kasi prior to 2014, wala pang biometrics yung ating registration system eh. So after 2014, mandatory na yung biometrics, which means that if the last time you voted was before 2014, then most likely hindi ka nakapagpa-update nung 2014, which means tanggal ka. Right? Kasi we delisted several million people en masse nung 2014 eh, because they didn't have biometrics in the system. Ito yung mga tao na when they come to us now, they say, the last time I voted was 1998. Sabi ko, any interaction with COMELEC since then? Wala. So, yun, before 2014 yan. Ngayon, if you registered after 2014, then the likelihood is meron ka ng biometrics. In which case, if you've missed 2 elections since then, all you really need to do is to reactivate your registration. So, tama si Sir Ed, yung cut-off mo essentially is 2014. If you'd been not voting before 2014, then likely you need to register as a new voter now.
But does that
Kasi iba
apply
yung
to
first quarter storm.
to OFWs as well? I mean, does that therefore assume that the biometrics were applied even for people who voted after 2014, but incidentally they voted abroad?
Yes. By 2014, all of COMELEC's voter rolls had biometrics in them.
Okay.
No? So that's more than 1 million overseas voters, and then at the time around 50 plus million local voters.
Ano mag-reactivate, Direk?
Ma'am Nuch, all you need to do is go to the COMELEC office where you're registered, tell them that you were a registered voter before and that you want to reactivate. There's a form that you have to fill up, and then you just hand the form over to them, and then they'll
Director, hindi lumalabas ng bahayan si Lucci eh. So, yun yung paano yan? Yung mga ayaw lumabas sa bahay.
Takot ako
Pumunta na ngayon,
lumabas.
Madaming,
Okay.
ano yan eh, A2 na yan, A3 pa.
Yun po ang problema because
Langya ka. Data privacy, wait.
we've been trying to get some sort of authorization for at least for some groups of people like reactivations, because in theory nandun na naman yung biometrics mo eh kasi reactivation ka na lang. So in theory dapat pwede na sanang online yung transaction.
Yeah.
Pero po the reason why we can't do online right now is because of 2 reasons, no? Biometrics is just one of them. The other reason is Republic Act 8189. Yung voter registration law specifically requires that you have to be physically present in person before the election officer. So, yun, kasama po doon yung reactivation. Kaya although we are trying to get some sort of legal authority, it's like a workaround, pero hindi pa po lumalabas eh. So for now, tuloy-tuloy na punta muna tayo.
Director,
Yes po, ma'am.
Mabagal yung ating rollout ng vaccination, and I think until next year, meron pa rin tayong mga restrictions related to COVID, the pandemic. Kumusta na po yung mga balak yung changes in the way we carry out the campaign? And in the voting itself, sabi nyo, gusto nyo ng 2-day registration, saka magkakaroon 2-day voting pala. At saka meron pa rin ba tayong mall voting? Matutuloy pa ba yun? Yung mga ganong balak. Anong
Opo.
changes are most likely?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, actually, we've been planning all along for elections to happen under pandemic conditions. No? We never had any great hopes na matatapos to by 2022. So all of our planning is geared towards that. Having said that, marami tayong changes na gagawin. Like you mentioned, campaigning, obviously. Hindi natin pwede pagbawal outright yung in-person campaigning, but we will have restrictions, no?
Like mass gatherings, no? I suppose.
Yeah, these are mass gatherings kasi. So one of the more I don't know, one of the more effective and I think impactful prohibitions that we will be pushing forward is yung bawal kumain sa mga rally. Kasi favorite activity ng mga yan ng mga politiko habang nagsasayaw sila sa stage, pinagkakain yung mga tao. So pagbabawalan po natin yan. We will restrict the number of people at the gatherings. Obviously, like you said, this is a mass gathering, so we must maintain social distancing. And then, of course, masking requirements. So that's campaigns. Magbabago rin po yung election day. You mentioned a 2-day voting period. I have to admit, that's still not off the table, but it's not really the preferred solution. No, medyo delikado kasi yung idea na 2-day elections kasi basically matutulog yung balota sa gabi. I mean, sa polling place, no? So I mean, kahit na 2-3 oras lang 'yan, that's still a period of time where the ballots are uncounted and essentially vulnerable, right? So mas ang preferred ngayon is the longer voting day, no? So if before we used to hold elections in 8 hours, we're looking at the possibility of holding it for 12 or maybe longer, right? But may cost din po yan. Ang cost naman yan ay yung pagod ng teacher.
Yes.
Dahil yung mga guro, on election day, we have started working at around 3 in the morning to 4, no? 3, 4 in the morning. So, if you make them work for 15 hours, plus the 3, plus, all of the hassle and stress, you're predisposing them to error. Magkakamali at magkakamali yan, right? So, one of the possible solutions is shifting. Pinag-uusapan din po yan, no? So, 2 shifts, right? But then again, that has a problem also. Because right now, we're looking at 110,000 precincts. That's, in just round numbers, that's 330 teachers. So, if you have 2 shifts of 3 teachers, that's 660,000, just the teachers. So, you can imagine the cost implications. No?
Yes.
Right.
Yes po.
Anong premise natin sa May 2022? I mean, as you're planning this, anong assumption natin? That it's still, for example, that it's still just 1 day of voting. Alam ko, pinag-usapan natin dati yan, that there were options na hindi necessarily 1 day lang.
Yes, hindi pa nga po off the table yung multiple days of voting. But we are leaning towards the single day.
Okay.
Because
Single day, longer hours.
yeah,
Yes.
because it's the easiest fit eh. Dahil nandiyan na yan, 1 day. And COMELEC has always traditionally had the power to extend voting hours.
Okay.
O yung mobile voting o kaya mail-in voting na ginagawa sa ibang bansa ngayon. Is that possible sa atin?
Yung mobile voting, no. We don't have any sort of provision in law for that. We don't even have any tradition for that. Yung postal voting, yes, we've done postal voting, but for overseas. No, for overseas voting. And the problem there is that when we do postal voting overseas, the work really is done by the postal system of the host country. Our postal system in the Philippines, I think, is in the middle of modernization. So there are some very serious questions about whether or not it will be up to the task, right? And by 2022, so 2022 is a year away. It's like, okay, it's exactly 1 year and 3 days.
Yes, actually. Yeah.
So that puts a very, very different complexion to the whole problem. Kaya nga po, ang talagang namumuro na solution ngayon is expanding the absentee voting law. No? Absentee voting privilege is available to people and to employees. So hopefully, ma-expand yan so that will include senior citizens, persons with disability, and perhaps indigenous peoples, no, basically the vulnerable sectors.
Director, is it safe to say that actually technology-wise, kaya nating hanapan ng solusyon lahat to. Ang balakid talaga at this point is really
Batas.
yung batas.
Yung batas.
Oo naman, sir. Technologically speaking, there are a lot of solutions that are available. Except that, for some reason, we're not really adopting a more aggressive approach towards modernizing everything. No? Despite the pressure of the pandemic, which I personally thought would be the impetus for wide-reach changes, what we're looking at is incremental changes, no? So paunti-unti. So parang ganyan, no? And so that's what we're gonna
Kasi
be.
nga halimbawa diyan yung physical presence mo, no, sa ano. I know a lot of people are now saying, kakabukas ko lang ng bank account ng isang araw, nasa kama lang ako, kinunang ko lang yung passport ko, tinawagan ako ng branch manager, pwede bang mag-Viber lang tayo para nakita kita. That was their KYC. And tapos na. And I'm sure a lot of people are saying, why can't it be that simple for us as well?
That's right. And in fact, like I said, no, when we started talking about this as early as middle of last year, that was the hope. The hope was that because this is so critical and so important, that we would be more audacious, I guess is the word, in adopting new technologies. Because like you said, no, in your example, you literally can deposit a check with a picture on your phone.
Right.
So,
baka naman nabisi sila sa charter change. Kaya hindi yung mga technological advancements ang naisip nila. But are you relieved at least that that's out of the way? Diba? For a while, everybody was saying if we're gonna do cha-cha, ang ratification niyan will be in sync with elections, right? But having said that, that's out of the way, I suppose, completely, no? But the other thing that's still in your way is the Bangsamoro, right? Bangsamoro
Right.
parliamentary elections. So yun, synchronized yun.
Opo.
Tama ba? Yeah.
Sa usaping Bangsamoro naman, it's good because we're not the only ones working on that naman. BTA is working with us, no, yung Transition Authority. And they do a lot of the heavy lifting as well because they're the ones drafting the Bangsamoro Electoral Code. Advisory ang COMELEC, no? As for the Bangsamoro Electoral Office, it's really a matter of reorienting our existing regional office there. So while it will be a challenge because it will be an entirely different election system, no, entirely different government.
Yes.
In fact, it's gonna need 2 ballots, I believe, no. So that is a challenge. But again, it's a small territory, and I think there's still time for it.
Teka muna, Direk, di ba dapat nga synchronized lahat, pati barangay elections na ilang beses nang na-postpone?
Hindi po sinisynchronize ang barangay, Ma'am Luch. Hanggang lang po, hanggang local government lang po tayo.
I see. Okay. All right. So we're just preparing essentially for the national elections and of course the local and then the Bangsamoro. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Director, you've been trying to regulate campaign finance, no? Mukhang mas magiging challenging to considering the circumstances. Saka yung technology ngayon, advances in technology. Are you thinking of new measures to tighten regulation? Is there any effort?
Well, there are discussions about it, ma'am, but there are a lot of new measures that I think need a lot more law for us to be able to really move against, no? Just off the top of my head, the simple act of sending money through your phone, that is very hard to police. I mean, I for one don't know how we can police that. I don't know that anyone is able to police that. Ang problema po kasi, when we talk about these things, these are changes, these are innovations that should not only apply to elections. These are changes that should apply to the whole range of e-government. Unfortunately, we ignore it, and then pagdating ng eleksyon, pipilitin natin na COMELEC, gawin nyo na yan, ba't wala kayong ginagawa?
Sir, linawin ko lang yan. When you say we ignore it, is that premised on our assumption that you're already having this conversation with not only government regulators, not only with but even, let's say, with private fintech alliance of the Philippines, for example. Are you having this conversation with both the public and private sector?
Well, sir, there's really no conversation to have with fintech because COMELEC is not even mandated or empowered to look into that. So wala talaga eh. Wala kaming anchor eh. Just like social media.
Okay, so sa public lang, have you had that conversation? When you say na hindi pinapansin eh, but have you had that conversation, let's say with Congress, whoever you need to talk to enable what you want to happen?
Oh, yes, sir. And I was going to say, since 2013, we've been asking for laws to regulate social media.
Yun nga, I was going to ask you, how will you implement campaign rules under the Omnibus Election Code?
Right.
Social media, which will probably be overused, in the coming elections, given that mass gatherings will be so limited, right?
That's right.
Paano monitoring yan? Paano ba?
Wala po. We're making things up out of whole cloth because there is no law to govern it. In the last elections, for example, if we did not expand the meaning of broadcast media to include social media, we would not be able to effectively regulate social media in any way. But try to find a law that says that social media is part of broadcast media and you won't find anything because it doesn't exist. Because it was an attempt to regulate in the absence of any law governing it. We were hoping that it would cause a greater stir. Then at least it would be talked about. But it's not being talked about. So that's the problem. And now, here's the thing though. The pandemic has accelerated everyone's timetable supposedly. Diba? Because even if you say that these changes are large and paradigm shifting, so obviously you're going to need a longer time to do it, it's become irrelevant because pandemya na eh. And you need these solutions now. And you're looking at private sector, you're looking at private enterprise, and they're doing it, but we're not doing it. And so that's a little frustrating. And it is doubly frustrating because everyone looks to COMELEC and expects COMELEC to pull the solutions out of thin air and to criticize and then criticizing COMELEC for not being able to do it. Ano bang pagkakadesenyo ng COMELEC na pati yan kaya namin gawin? No? So we're doing...
Well, sir, yes, sir. Sir, you are citing the need for a law, but it has to start somewhere. Do you have already a champion in Congress, for example? Do you have somebody you're talking to in Congress with regard to the need to put new or better laws in place, especially for 2022, with the pandemic in mind?
Well, I would like to think that there are enough committees in Congress that are supposed to be looking at electoral reforms, that they are supposed to be looking at suffrage laws. And we do tell them. And in fact, the last time we mentioned it, it was in the Senate, and it was at the confirmation hearing of one of our commissioners. So they know the fact. They know this. They know this problem.
I hate to say this, but is it possible that the status quo will work for them more in the coming elections than if they actually pushed for reforms, in the line of what we want to happen, technological?
I'm sorry, the signal cut out.
Is it possible? Yeah, is it possible? And I know that...
I'm joking.
Okay, I get the joke. Sorry for being slow.
That's why you will never get your laws, no?
You will never get it.
They don't want social media regulated. They don't want all of these platforms regulated. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, especially campaign finance.
Di na naman tayo naririnig ni Director Jimenez. Nakamute yata. Nakamute po kayo. Nakamute kayo.
The more opaque, the better for all the candidates. Yan ang problema. But are you
also in the end, kasi you need a champion. You need a champion in Congress, di ba? And for anybody to push any law, whether it's a benevolent law or whatever law of interest to any group, you would still want to pick a champion who will raise your banner in Congress.
But
I mean, it's hard to rely on the committees to just conjure these things out of thin air.
Well, we are open to to cooperating with Congress every time, sir. I mean, there are some pending laws, but unfortunately, none for these things that really matter.
What
I mean,
about what about conversations with the platforms themselves? I know you've had conversations with representatives of Google, representatives of Facebook, for example. I know Twitter has a public policy officer for nations, if not the whole world. But how far can those conversations go, and how much can you do in cooperation with the platforms themselves?
Well, we've had conversations with the platforms, but right off the bat, one of the major platforms, I think they only have 3 people here in the Philippines. One major platform doesn't even have an officer in the Philippines. You'd have to go all the way to Singapore to schedule a conversation with them. So there's that. Second, we have talked to them, those that we could reach. We have talked to them, and in the past, they have put us on some sort of whitelist. This whitelist allows us to report very quickly, and the turnaround time for reporting of violations of their community standards, it's quicker. So it's very helpful. A platform has also helped us to track the political ads placed on it by candidates. So that's also very helpful. But all of this is short of the kind of control that a lot of people are envisioning. People want to talk about controlling or tracking political ads as they're being made. Can't do that. People are talking about prohibiting certain people from posting certain things. In the Philippines, haven't been able to do that. So basically, what the private entity wants to do in the Philippines, they can do. And if you make the case for certain innovations, then perhaps they will consider it. Okay. One of the things that's making me rather hopeful is that there are some election tools that we saw in the States, that were used in the States, that I hear are now available in the Philippines. I hear because I have not yet confirmed it myself. I'm speaking. Well, I don't want to jinx it, but basta meron po, no? So I have to reach out to them first. But in general, what it is that it's a tool that was available in the States, and it's not rolled out like universally, and it's rolled out in separate jurisdictions on an individual basis. So last I heard, it was available in the Philippines, but only a handful of people know about it. So I am trying to get my hands on it. We'll see how it pans out. But if it is available, then it will be a great help.
Okay. I don't know if you're referring to the same thing, but one particular nightmare I have is the inevitability, not just of fake news, but of deep fakes. And we've seen deep fakes play out in many elections now, and it's really, really becoming so good that it's scary. Is this on the radar of concern as well? And I'm afraid to ask, I mean, can we even do anything about it?
Deep fakes is something we're aware of, but it's not something that we're looking at presently with a view to basically stopping. No? Again, deep fakes are now you can actually make a kind of deep fake with a phone app. There is a phone app that can be used to do something of the sort. Pero yung the kind of deep fakes that you're talking about, like Bill Hader morphing into Tom Cruise, that sort of thing, wala pa po tayo nakikita niyan dito sa Pilipinas. The greater concern in the realm of disinformation is really the voter suppression tactics that are being rolled out now. Among these voter suppression tactics, obviously, is spreading the rumor that there will be no elections in 2022. The rumor that people know who you voted for, in some specific contests, the rumor that there is only one candidate running for office. So ito yung mga voter suppression tactics na nakikita natin, and that we're working very hard to address. No, for now, the only tools that we have really are trying to stay ahead of it on social media, so that when it pops up, we try to be there to counteract it with facts. At some point, this will become a very difficult task. But for now, it's still doable, and we're still able to keep ahead of it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Comelec spokesman and Director James Jimenez, maraming salamat po for joining us.
Salamat.
Thank you, Director
Thank you.
Jimenez. Salamat.
And that will be all for this special edition of The Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News.